As well, what is your opinion on retention? People hold back as a retention. Do you think it should be the 5% and above, or do you think it should be lower?
I think the fundamental thing about retention is if it is due, then it needs to be paid. As simple as that.
You know, with the fluctuation of materials and labour, that ultimately has meant that they've ended up losing money on the project because they've secured cost at the rate 3 years ago. So, like, how do you have the foresight and sort of understanding to try and mitigate risk in that sense?
I think it is very much about what you're signing up to. So if the price of a material, say for instance, goes above 5% above what you've priced, you might have built some contingency into your original prices, but there should be a clause within the contract where if it goes above 5%, you need to have a discussion.
It was just interesting to hear that procurement model because I've never heard that before. The gentleman's name I was recording was called Damien, and I think he said in America, I'm not 100% sure, but how they procure projects isn't the same as how we do it here. A lot of the times the main client has direct contracts with each of the subcontractors, and then the main contractor just acts as a project manager.
When I first started my business, I was kind of saying yes to everything.
I still struggle to say no now.
Yeah, I know. I think the difference now is it's got to be the right type of project, you know. However, sometimes clients do come to me and maybe it might be the wrong project, but because it's for the right client, I'll probably just say yes.
But that's the relationship side of thing as well, like we were saying earlier. If you've got a good working relationship with someone, then you can forge that connection type thing where you're happy to do projects that are kind of outside of your scope for them. Ben, welcome to SQFT-Stories.
Hi Callum, thank you for having me.
And the long trip down yesterday, and you stayed overnight.
Yeah, 4.5 hours in the car.
Well, I appreciate you coming down and making the trip and coming on. Looking forward to this one as well because, you know, you've got a lot of experience in the industry, and you obviously, the services you guys carry out look like they're really, really positive. So many things I want to touch on, but I usually kind of start at the start. So do you just want to give us an idea of how you made your way into the construction industry?
Yeah, for me it was actually quite simple. My dad has been a developer for, he's now retired, but he's been a developer for probably 30 years. So I was brought up in the industry, and you know, naturally there was one way. I was either going to go one way or the other. I was either going to go and, you know, get some work experience with him or follow a different route. And I actually went and did some work experience for him, and you know, I wouldn't say I loved it because he got me on the tools. And then I actually decided, do you know what? I want to do something like this for a living. So my mum actually got me, you know, with me as well, got me a place at Anglia Ruskin University doing construction design and management. And that was kind of the start of, you know, where I am today. So I actually deviated slightly after university, did 4 years at university. First year Anglia Ruskin in Chelmsford, and then I followed my now wife up to Aberdeen and did 3 years up there. But yeah, about three or four years after I completed university, after spending that time in the energy industry as a construction engineer, I thought, do you know what, I need to go back into construction, which is what I love doing. How did you, sorry to interrupt, but I just thought of something then. How did you find it as a young person, were you kind of like a manager, I suppose, in the energy industry? Yeah, I mean, I was, not that I'm sort of strict on titles. My title was a, you know, construction engineer. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I was necessarily managing people. I was very much looking at, you know, the construction side of building gas plants, you know, on a level that I've never seen before. You know, these projects were multi billions in construction value. So it was really interesting. However, yeah, as I say, I wasn't really managing people, and that's one of the reasons why I left, because I knew I had an opportunity to use my management skills back in the construction industry. So, I mean, the only reason I ask is because I've spoken with quite a few people whereby they were put into senior management roles at a younger age,
And traditionally in our industry in construction, there's almost like a unwritten rule. If you've kind of like, the older you are, the less you need to hear from the younger people in the industry. It's almost like you've done your time type thing.
Yeah.
I was sharing some stories recently with someone who come on whereby, 7 or 8 years ago, when I was in a little bit more of a senior position, I struggled with the management side of things, trying to sort of manage people who were 40s, 50s, who knew a hell of a lot more than me. So I was just interested to see if it was something you experienced as you kind of made your way in.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of people that I sort of lived up to, and about when I finished in the energy industry, I went and worked for a main contractor who's actually now one of my clients. Started, I suppose, not necessarily from the bottom, because I was actually thrown right in at the deep end. Started as a project manager, working on some really high-end projects, and was working for and with people with 30, 40, 50 years worth of experience. But I think that's where I've probably learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. But I'm a great believer in, you don't grow unless you make mistakes. So that was, kind of just the start of my journey, and it's led to where I am now. So
as you made your way up to Aberdeen and you had a bit more work experience kind of like up to now. So give us some experience you had along the way from sort of like coming out of university and working in the energy sector and leading up to sort of the company you do now.
As I mentioned earlier, I spent, you must have seen the Vespa motorcycles.
Yeah.
And that particular company who's on the side, E&I, was the company that I spent 4 years with as a construction engineer. After that, I went and worked in London for about 4 or 5 years for a main contractor, doing predominantly high-end refurbs, ranging in contract value anything from about £500,000 to, I think the biggest project I did at that time was about £4 million. And I was managing it from start to finish. But not only the construction phase, I was very much involved right from the start. So as the main contractor, you'd either receive a tender or you'd price it on a negotiated basis. I would do all of that as well. And spent 5 years doing that. And
you must have learned so much in those 5 years.
I learned a huge
working on
amount.
behalf of the main contractor, so you almost see everything that goes on. You're dealing with every single individual person that kind of contributes to a project as such.
You are, yeah. I mean, you're dealing with specialist subcontractors. You're dealing with communicating with site manager on a daily basis, and the general trades. You're doing site visits, you're discussing, matters with the design team, you're having, bi-weekly or monthly meetings with the client. So there was, a lot that I got involved with, and it was a massive learning curve, huge learning curve. And I think that was the foundations for my company, because as soon as I finished there, I went and set up BJC construction projects, and now do pretty much the same thing.
So how did you find working as a main contractor and dealing with subcontractors in the industry? Because it's always a topic of conversation, how main contractors treat subcontractors, how subcontractors do things that they shouldn't do in terms of loads of different ways, and how they should work with main contractors. So what was your experience actually being the main contractor and working with subcontractors?
I think my experience at the time was, it certainly wasn't contractual. It was more about, relationships. So I think, having worked for someone else, a lot of the time it was using their own recommended subcontractors. And I think naturally, as you start to take more control of the projects, you start to learn who are the good, who are the bad, who performed, who didn't. And then on the next project, I maybe thought, this person didn't perform. I'll maybe go and use this person who's been recommended instead. So I think it was a, quite learning curve on who to use, who not to use, and that takes time.
Yeah, definitely. And something you said there is it was more based off like a relationship perspective. There's something really to be said about that, because providing you're a contractor who can facilitate the work, there's something to be said about actually enjoying working with the person that you're employing, I suppose, or the subcontractor you're employing. Like if you get on with them as well, and you've actually got that, not necessarily a fully formed out of work relationship type thing like your friends, but as long as you get on with the subcontractor and you have a relationship with them, I think that goes a hell of a long way. Because a lot of the times where we've carried out projects, a lot of the subcontractors that may not have performed tend to be people that are either new, who we don't really know, and I won't name any names, but they've come in and maybe seen it as just like a couple of money signs for the project, and then they're going to move on and do something else rather than an actual forging a long working relationship. So it's definitely something to be said about having an actual working relationship with a subcontractor.
Yeah, and I think what is extremely important as well is it's making sure that your expectations align. So, as you can imagine, on these high-end projects, the clients expect the best quality out there. So it's ensuring those open conversations are had early doors in the instance where you're using someone new, and it's making sure that you both are in alignment when it comes to those types of things. I very much like to, when it comes to relationships, a lot of the time you are in the job. Sometimes it pays dividends just to kind of come away from the job, maybe go for a coffee, maybe go for some lunch, and talk about other things. And that is...
It relieves tension.
Yeah, that's really helped
project.
with a lot of relationships, particularly with a lot of the subcontractors that I use. I do really make the time and effort now to, get outside of the job.
It's important, really important.
It's really important, yeah.
One thing you mentioned in there as well was that that main contractor you were working for wasn't very contractual. Do you see that as an issue in the industry as well, where you have the likes of the tier ones and maybe some tier twos where they're so contractual that subcontractors or various other people struggle to work with them because they don't actually understand what they're signing up to?
Yeah, when I mentioned that was probably about 8-9 years ago, where it wasn't particularly contractual. That has changed massively.
General in the industry?
Yeah, in general in the industry. I would say now that most of the projects, certainly that I work on, there are, subcontracts in place with most subcontractors. But I think it's all about, the only way that really works is if the subcontractors really understand what they're signing up to. I always like to be... I like to just explain it in black and white. I would always go through a subcontract with a subcontractor before they're signing up to it and make sure they know what they're signing up to. And if they're unhappy with something, let's discuss it before they sign on the dotted lines and it becomes potentially an issue later. Because
at the end of the day, it's not only an issue for them later, it's an issue for you later as well.
Of course it is, yeah.
So it is paramount that you do iron those details out.
Yeah, of course.
So you worked at that main contractor for, you said 5 years, was it 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I think it was about 5 years, yeah.
And then that's when you started the business that you do now.
Yeah.
So what was the idea behind starting the business? Was it more the fact that you've worked in the industry for so long and you felt like you could kind of do those services yourself?
I think there was certainly an element of that, Callum. I think naturally with my dad being an entrepreneur, I had that kind of embedded in me, and I've always wanted to start something for myself. I also wanted to be able to provide, the best service for the same types of clients, but for multiple clients, if you kind of see what I mean. And I felt a bit stuck when I was working for someone else. I felt like I couldn't give my all. So that was the reason for starting my business. But there was so many other reasons. Me and my wife moved. She got a job in Norwich, and it was really a case of I moved to Norwich. I was still working for the main contractor at the time, and it was kind of like a pause for both of us, you know, a thinking moment of, you know, what do I do next? And I concluded, start my business,
yeah.
you know.
And then did you have, so to start the business, was it more, because you do like high-end residential projects now, was that the case at the start, or were you kind of doing smaller types of projects and then you've kind of made your way into doing the larger ones?
I think, you know, naturally with starting, you know, certainly for me anyway, I'm sure other people can relate to this, I'm sure you can relate to this. When I first started my business, I was kind of saying yes to everything. So
I still struggle to say no now.
Yeah, I know. I think the difference now is it's got to be the right type of project, you know.
You are right.
However, sometimes clients do come to me and maybe, you know, it might be the wrong project, but because it's for the right client, I'll probably just say yes.
Yeah, but that's the relationship side of thing as well, like we were saying earlier. If you've got a good working relationship with someone, then you can forge that connection type thing where you're happy to do projects that are kind of outside of your scope for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We're doing one at the moment. We're predominantly commercial, but we're doing a high-end residential in central London at the moment, which we don't really do. But it's a project management company we've worked with for numerous years. And the project is difficult itself. It's dead central London. It's 18th floor. There's no lifts to get materials up, etc. So there's not a lot of parking as well. So there's loads of difficulties you could see on the project. It would be something we turn down usually, but because we've worked with that project management company before and we trust each other, it's almost to the point where we know we'll both be able to perform and get on okay.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So similar to what you were saying there, where you kind of take things on you outside your scope as such.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to your question about the types of projects I did at the start, I mean, as I say, I pretty much said yes to everything. But I you know, looking back, I worked on some really, really nice stuff. I mean, one of the first projects was actually a block of flats in Birmingham, of all places. Slightly different, well, not slightly different to what I do now, but it's actually working as part of the construction management team,
right,
in the cost consultancy part of the business for a developer. And I suppose I was involved for about 6, maybe 9 months, essentially tracking costs. The developer kind of lost a little bit of control of what they were spending and what they were forecast to spend moving forward.
Oh, so you were a cost consultant during the project?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was actually hired with another QS who I knew I'd known for probably about 10 years, and he brought me on board with him to basically help them out with their costs. So it was really interesting, and we were dealing with, I think the total construction cost ended up about 8 million.
Wow, so it's a big project.
Yeah, it was a big project, yeah.
So what, and again, don't have to name names or values, but what types of things were causing costs to kind of spiral out of control?
I think it was, there wasn't the right setup on the project. There wasn't a big enough, experienced enough cost consultancy part of the construction management team delivering the project. I mean, without going into too much detail, there was also, and it was an area I was not involved in, but the development side of things very much developed as the project moved forwards in construction, which is not really how you want to work because it opens so many risks. I mean, you expect variations, but you do expect a design package at the start of the project that gives you some form of cost security.
Yeah.
You're going to get things.
Gives you a foundation to work.
Gives you a foundation, and that didn't really exist.
Right, so that's
it was very open-ended.
Oh, Christ. So I imagine, did you get people, I'm not saying people exploited it, but did you get people who might have, because people do that nowadays within projects, if they see kind of like a bit of design discrepancy, they might see like a not for instance say go for the jugular, but they might actually think, oh, we could probably make ourselves a bit of money here. We'll go for that one.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I do see a lot of that. I think there are a lot of instances where people price low because it's so open ended, and then once they've signed on the dotted line, variations are coming in left, right, and centre, and that's where they make their money. I tend to steer clear of those types of projects now.
Yeah.
Purely on the basis of there's just going to be issues down the line. I think it's fundamental to have that design element, at a level which gives you kind of cost security before you kind of start on site, really.
Yeah. What sort of so whilst you were consulting and trying to like track cost on that project, what sort of things did you implement, or what sort of things were you looking out for as such?
I think it was very much forecasting ahead. So it was looking at what packages are coming up. How can we eliminate the cost risk moving forward? So, say for instance, as an example, it may well have been stuff like the fire strategy, or the lift works. It was looking at packages like that where, before they actually start taking place on site, getting the design to a level and going out to various different subcontractors and getting prices and, kind of benchmarking that against, allowances that you've got for those various different packages. And if they didn't align, it's looking at, how can we value engineer that without compromising the intention with that. Stuff like fire strategy, for instance, there's regulations that you have to adhere to, etc. So there's not a huge amount of flexibility, but it's just looking at those packages in a different way, so that when you do come to undertaking it on site, there's the risk from a cost perspective and also program perspective is minimised.
Yeah, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it, to a few things that came into my mind now. So I suppose that's kind of like a design and build evolving project.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's exactly what it was.
It's almost like, was it difficult to keep the project moving because you're kind of designing and consulting as you're going? So there must have been like hurdles and hiccups along the way where things couldn't move ahead because costs weren't confirmed, or spec type thing wasn't confirmed.
Absolutely, there was certainly quite a lot of pauses, which could have been not necessarily eliminated, but could have been reduced substantially if that design element had been done a lot sooner. I mean, as I say, I was only involved for 6 to 9 months, but what I saw was the programme was, certainly increased because of all these pauses, and it was really down to missing design elements which hadn't been, costed at that, at the points in time which you expect them to be.
So sort of like that's one of kind of your experiences on the projects, but give us an idea of other projects that you are either working on or have worked on, and the types of services that you offer in your business.
So my business predominantly offers a turnkey type service to main contractors, which is exactly what I did when I was working for my previous employer. So essentially that is, client comes to me, they've got a negotiated project, or they've got a tender where maybe we're pricing against 3 other contractors. I will then price it for them, and if I win it for them, I will then run it from start to finish. So it's very much, as I say, I use the word turnkey because it's literally a one-stop shop, and I'm involved. I'm not only involved until PC, I'm involved all the way to the end of the defects period. Yeah. And the way, maybe rambling on a little bit here, but just to give you an idea of how I work exactly the same way as a main contractor does, in terms of I am signing up to retention. So I'm getting paid, the same on the same basis as the main contractor. And that for me, the reason why I did that is because it just means we're on the same level playing field, and we're in it together.
So it's not like you're taking your fee on PC and then see you later.
No, and it means that there's that full accountability from start to finish. So if I price something, I make an error, it's up to me to make sure that, you know, the contractor's not losing out, but also, you know, because of the terms that I'm signed up to, if I make a pricing error, I then take the hit as well. So it's...
You've got skin in the game, I suppose.
It's all about skin in the game.
Yeah.
And I love that way, because it does put that element of pressure on, but it also means, as I say, going back to accountability, I think we're in it together.
Yeah, I actually think there's, this might sound a bit polarising, but I actually think there's a real lack of accountability in the construction industry. And what I mean by that is experiences that I've had on projects. I find that people are very quick to blame and throw other people under a bus when something goes wrong. There's always an alternative reason barring themselves as to why something's gone wrong on a project. I mean, I experience that all the time with people on projects, sometimes not even projects myself. Like when I'm speaking with friends who are running their own projects, something's gone wrong, you know, like I don't know, the electrician's done something wrong and they're like, yeah, I know, but the dry liner's done this, this and this, so it meant that I can do that. Rather than like actually having a look in the mirror and thinking like, oh, I'll be accountable for that. Or, you know, if costs have gone out of control, then maybe the designer is not accountable for the fact they haven't allowed for something. It's more like, well, they've overpriced it and it's been a purchase order's been sent when it shouldn't have been sent type thing. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I do feel like there's a bit of an accountability element in our industry where there's a lack of it.
I totally agree with you, Callum. I think it's something that is... I definitely think there's change. I mean, I'm talking from personal experience here. I think for me personally, that is where subcontracts really pay dividends, because with a subcontract, if, say, for instance, a subcontractor, you know, they've signed up to a certain scope for a certain value over a certain time period, you know, and you've got all your specifications, your drawings, etc., attached to that, which they've priced against. If they then come back to you 3 months later and say, well, I didn't price that, the subcontract says, well, that is what your price is based on. It's clearly specified within that drawing. It's clearly broken down in your bill of quantities, but you've missed it.
Yeah.
And that way, there's no real further discussion. But I think there is still this element of companies out there still trying to play the game, even when you've got subcontracts in place. And I think it's for me, it's about not showing any weakness when it comes to that. You know, you've got to stand up to what they've signed up to and not letting them take advantage of you.
So you must have dealt with numerous subcontractors in your time, main contractors as well. Or you were a main contractor at your time and you're acting on behalf of one now, but what's some things that you look out for when you, say you want to start using a subcontractor, what's certain elements that you look out for that they can do well that would kind of like make you want to use them on projects?
I think the first thing I would always do with a subcontractor, particularly if they're new, is pre-qualify them. So it would be looking at fundamentals like track history, references, looking at their accounts. You know, I think something that is really important right now is looking at their credit history as well. Yeah. So, for instance, it's delving even deeper than that. It's looking at whether or not they've gone bust before. It's not necessarily saying that you wouldn't use them if that's happened, but I think you really need to delve deep and give yourself reassurance that they are the right person for the project. Even with people that you've used before, I think it is still worthwhile doing those checks, you know, exactly the same ones that I've just mentioned. Not necessarily every single time, but just to give you reassurance that there isn't an issue going forward. I'm talking from experience, about companies going bust. The last thing you want is 6 months through a 12-month program that the subcontractor is supposed to be delivering, is that for them to go bust.
Has that happened on?
Yeah.
It has, yeah.
It's happened before.
And obviously without naming names or, projects, but how did you deal with it and overcome it, I suppose?
Well, I think the flags were there. I think really because the flags were there, they were never overpaid.
Mm.
They were actually underpaid because they had to adhere to the same subcontract or main contract terms were within their subcontract as the main contractor. So I think it was really a case of the subcontract saved me.
Right.
It did. However, on other projects, and this is maybe something we can go into later, but I can't understand how, no specific names, but there are companies out there that ask for 100% up front.
Do people do that?
Yeah, they do.
Do people pay that?
Well, sometimes you don't have a choice.
Really?
Sometimes you don't have a choice.
Is that for materials, or is that
So that's for materials and labour.
And labour?
And labour, yeah. I've had 3 or 4, again, I'm not going to name the companies, 3 or 4 different companies where those are their terms. It was a client-selected subcontractor. That's what they wanted. It's very specialised. But they want 100% up front. And I think it can be risky.
That's massively risky. I mean, I understand upfront payments for special materials that need to be ordered in that are on large values and long lead times. I understand people ask for maybe upfront payments for those types of things, but 100% upfront on a project where there is a supply and an install, because the install obviously hasn't happened.
Yeah. Well, no, it hasn't. It hasn't, and and they also won't. Some of them won't sign up to retention either. So, as the main contractor, if you're having to adhere to a JCT main contract, you've almost inevitably got 5% retention until practical completion. So if you're paying 100%, yes, you've got your overhead and profit on top of that. But if you've got 5% retention, number one, if materials are not on site and it's not been installed, you probably won't get away with 100% depending on the client's QS.
Of course.
So there's a cash flow issue, but it stems further than that. I think there is just a bit of an issue when it comes to how is that allowed.
I've never heard of 100% upfront before.
I've experienced it quite a few times.
On a supply only, like I said, if it's a specialist material or products that you're supplying and it's like a 12-week lead time and it's tens of thousands of pounds, for instance, I understand that.
Yeah.
But to claim 100% install up front before you even step foot on site is crazy. Because then it's like, what? Because unfortunately, the game of construction sometimes is like, it's the game of leverage, isn't it? So who's got leverage over who type thing. So like, do you owe them money? If you do, they're going to come to site and carry out the works. But once you have paid them 100%, like what? You don't have any leverage. It shouldn't be about leverage, but it is a lot of the time.
No, it shouldn't be about leverage at all, but you
kind of is sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I think if there is a bit of money left over, you can use it as leverage. But in these instances, you can't, catch on to the money.
Yeah,
it's very much about. I suppose it comes back to relationships and trust.
Exactly that.
I think that is fundamental.
What about so talking about the whole retention side of things as well, what is your opinion on retention in terms of, do you think it's a positive thing, and the sort of values that people hold back as a retention, do you think it should be the 5% and above, or do you think it should be lower?
It's a very good question, Callum. I think, to put it simply, retention's there for a reason. However, I think it is abused. I think it is abused from the point of view having spoken to lots and lots and lots of different people, subcontractors, main contractors, I think retention is there, you know, typically with JCT 5% prior to practical completion, and then 2.5% is released, you know, after that, and then you might have a 6 months defects period, you might have 12 months, you might even have longer, and then you get the 2.5% at the end of that. But I think the fundamental thing about retention is if it is due, then it needs to be paid.
Yeah,
It's as simple as that. If there is a legitimate reason for it not being due, i.e., I don't know, there is a constant leak with a piece of equipment in a property and it's not being rectified, I think something like that is a means to hold on to retention. But I think there needs to be a justification for the amount that's been, you know, held,
Definitely.
rather than holding the full amount,
Yeah.
if you see what I mean. Because the retention is being held on the full contract amount. Do you know what I mean?
And that leak could be, you know, that the leak that needs sorting out could be, you know, like a value of £1,500, but they might have £25,000 held back, so they're almost, you know, like £25,000 out of pocket because of a £1,500 leak that they haven't fixed. I get, but you are right. It should be gauged per what item needs rectifying.
It should, and I think in those types of instances, you know, I've given an example of a leak, and I think it's really important that whether or not it's the main contractor who needs to come in and fix that or their subcontractor, I think it's showing willingness and being proactive when it comes to fixing that really pays dividends. Again, speaking from personal experience here. Once the leak is fixed and everything has been rectified as it should be, then at that point in time, retention should be released.
I heard I was actually recording with someone recently who does a similar sort of thing to what you do, more in the commercial world, and his background was he used to strategize for sort of like big corporate companies on their sort of like global project strategy. So if, say for instance, if they had £100 million to spend across the board on projects, he would strategize and cost consult from sort of like stage 0 to stage 2 type thing. And he was telling me a load of stories about how main contractors sometimes won't release the retention to the subcontractors even beyond the period where it's supposed to be released, because they have to use, you know, without specifically knowing what for, but they have to use those funds to fund other projects and fund other things that are going on, so they don't actually release the retentions. And he interestingly gave me a example of how, I think he said in America, I'm not 100% sure, but how they procure projects isn't the same as how we do it here. A lot of the times the main client has direct contracts with each of the subcontractors, and then the main contractor just acts as a project manager and has its own, I suppose, has their own fee, but it's not like like a client main contractor and then coming off it loads of subcontractors. It's literally client direct contract with subcontractors, and then the main contractor just gets a project management fee to manage the build. Apparently that's done a lot of the time in I think he said America. It was just interesting to hear that procurement model, because I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think there is quite funny we're actually talking about retention, because there's been quite a lot of conversations actually on LinkedIn of all places about this.
There's always something on there, isn't there?
And I really do think there is a solution with retention.
Go on.
I think you mentioned earlier about contractors using it to cash flow other projects. I think that's morally wrong. It's in the project. It's in the project. It's got to be used for the project, not something else. But also that money is, you know, if it's been held from the subcontractor, that money is essentially the subcontractors, but only when it's due. I think there should be an account or like an escrow.
Escrow, yeah.
Where that money is held, so no one can touch it. And that removes any of these problems. I mean, obviously you've then got the question mark around, actually getting that money out of there and paying the subcontractor. I do think that is potentially a way around it. I don't know anyone that does that at the moment.
No, I don't either. I mean, the American model of procuring was sort of, and the gentleman's name I was recording was called Damien, and that model was, he said, would eradicate the retention side of things, because it would be clients would hold contracts with the supply chain directly, so there's no middleman holding. Because I mean, the main contractor is almost like it is treated as like a bank for the subcontractors, like they own their money until it gets released at the end.
Yeah.
It was just I've never heard of when he said that. It was interesting, but he said because he's dealt, across the sort of like Europe, Middle East, and Africa type projects he's done, location wise, he said that that's common, and he's experienced that quite a lot. And it hasn't been, because in the UK, like, we have our own traditional procurement methods and design and build. He said it's just people who are willing to maybe go against the grain and do a different type of procurement model might help.
Yeah.
Give us an idea of sort of like, projects that you work on now, and sort of like projects that you want to aim to work for in the future.
Yeah, so at the moment, I typically work on 2 main contractor projects at once, that are on site. So at the moment I've got 2. So I'm kind of, at full capacity when it comes to that. And 2 really, really lovely projects, both in London, both very, very high end. Again, with, kind of ideal clients. And I do, on the other side of the fence, do client side project management and QS.
Okay.
Type work.
How's that different then, going from contractor side to client side?
Well, I've actually been doing it since the start.
Yeah.
So I've been going now I set up my company in August 2020, I believe. So on Company's House.
6th year. And
so I've been going, I didn't really start properly until about a year in. I've been going sort of properly for 5 years now. And I always wanted to work the other side of the fence, so that not only so that I can offer a wider range of services, but also to understand the other side of the fence. I'd always, created really good relationships with client-side project managers, QSs. So I had quite a lot of, knowledge when it came to speaking to them. So I now do that with my current business.
That's interesting, that I suppose being able to deliver the best possible service contractor side, you need to understand client side, because you can work with your supply chain from the contractor's perspective and say, look, this is things that we need to be able to eradicate because I know this because I've worked client side, and vice versa as well. Gives you a broader understanding of the whole process, I suppose. Well,
it does, yeah, absolutely. I think because of what I do on the main contractor side, which is, this turnkey service, price it, win it, and then project manage it from start to finish. Because I understand that process, I understand, program, I understand costs, I understand, the contractual side of things, quality, health and safety, and so forth. That really does pay dividends when it comes to working for, end user clients, because I understand that process. And when it comes to, for instance, running a tender process and evaluating tenders, I know what I'm looking out for because I've done it. So I do really, I'm actually getting quite a lot of, I've had probably 10 inquiries over the last 2 months for exactly those types of pieces of work. Client side, yeah.
Right. So would that be typically like a property developer has a portion of land and they need to appoint a main contractor, and then that's when you come in and you take it from there?
I don't tend to go for developers. I tend to go for someone that's, maybe bought a piece of land, building a new build, and they're going to go and live in it. So it's someone that is buying something to live in it rather than develop it to then sell it on for as much money as possible and make as big a margin as possible.
That gets cut through, I'd imagine, that model.
Yeah.
Well, from your perspective.
From my perspective,
because you're in the middle, aren't you?
Yeah, and I'm all, I'm going to be completely straight with you. I think my services are, the only way a client is going to get value is, they've got to pay for my services.
Of course.
But I'm very much about providing the best possible service, but they've got to pay for it. And I think, having worked with developers before, and I'm not trying to paint them all or tie them all with the same brush, that element,
save a pound, didn't they?
That element, I feel like I can't necessarily provide that type of service. So when it comes to end user clients, as I say, someone might have bought a piece of land, they're building a house, they might have an existing house that they're looking to extend. Those are the types of clients that are coming to me right now who need a project manager, quantity surveyor on board, and a lot of those are coming actually through architects.
Interesting. So, because you imagine developers are trying to eke as much money out of a project as possible. When I say project, to build, to sell. So, they're going to try and save money wherever they can. But you'd think if it's a luxury house being built or dwelling or even commercial project, if it's a luxury project, surely you would imagine that the cost involved in that, not from your perspective, but from everyone's perspective, are going to be heightened because of the level of quality that needs to be produced. Yeah. And you'd think that, from your perspective, if your fees are, if they're high fees, you'd imagine they're high for a reason. It's because you deliver a good service and you're gonna get the value for the money type thing.
Well, that's exactly it. And I think that's, with all of my clients now, certainly the long term ones, they value me, I value them, and there's no squibbling about my fees ever. And I think it's really about hanging on to those types of clients, because that's where I really add value. I really do. I mean, for instance, with end user clients, it may well be a high end project, but it's about choosing the contractor that, again, adds the most value to the project. They might not be the cheapest. They might be, in the middle in terms of price. But it's making sure that they've, for instance, broken every element down. They've included everything that's needed for the project, and that's what I do.
But do you really want to? I look at it as well. So like we, when we're carrying out a project and we're getting tenders in from various subcontractors, we a lot of the time won't just look at the bottom line in terms of like we'll actually have a look at what they've allowed for, previous history on projects. Yeah. Type of projects they've delivered before. Yeah. I think it's a common thing in our industry where, people who are evaluating the tenders, it's more scrolling to the bottom, seeing the line item at the bottom, oh wow, they're 10% cheaper, let's go with them. There's more money in the project if they're 10% cheaper. That's an issue that I hear a lot of people still come up against nowadays. I feel like it's been eradicated a bit more because of that. I feel like our industry has become a lot more professional. Yeah. And that's a very unprofessional way to procure, subcontract. In terms of just looking at the raw, I get you've got to be cost conscious, and providing they're in the remit, then it's usable. But I do think we've professionalised more as an industry, and we're not doing things like that as such anymore. But I do hear stories of people who do still do stuff like that. They just go just for the cheapest.
Yeah, Callum. I mean, you've literally taken words out of my mouth, because there's still so much of that going on, and that is actually something that I'm trying to. Really, the bit that I'm trying to fill the gap, with is on the end user side of things, is exactly what you've just said. It's not just about the bottom line. Yeah. Yes, money is important. It's about what does that actually consist of. Going back to the, who is the contractor? What's their experience? Track record. Looking at references, looking at their financials, have they got insurances in place? What is their team? What's the experience of their team? And just going into all those details, yes, you might pay more for someone who has got all those credentials, and has broken down their cost, to the finite detail, but that's what you're paying for. Yeah. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and why wouldn't you want to pay? The thing is, I get it. There are, in the world you work in, I suppose, it sounds like it's very high end, and it's a very professional project being carried out, and there's probably large sums involved in terms of like contracts and
Yeah.
end value build. So I'd understand that, but there are people who are still in the smaller projects, in and out, where they're doing, you know, like a small project for somebody who all they want is the cheapest and the most bang for the buck, I suppose you can say. So they do just go bottom line. What is it? $5,000 cheaper, let's use him. 10 grand cheaper, let's lose him. That's 15 grand in my pocket type thing. That's definitely still going. So like going forward, what's the kind of plans with the business? What sort of projects do you want to be working on, and like how do you see yourself evolving as a business owner, I suppose, in the industry?
I think the plan is plain and simple, really. It is to grow what I currently do. I think I do specialise particularly in the turnkey service from a main contractor perspective. I am talking to new clients. I've definitely got the capacity to take on at least one more client, and, you know, hopefully that will mean then growing the team, because it is just myself and one other at the moment.
So you're almost wearing multiple hats.
I am,
everything.
yeah, and I very much want to take, as much as I want to still be the client-facing role of the business, I want to take a bit of a step back. And there is also, and it's something that I've shared on my socials before as well, I'm looking to do my own projects as well. So that's currently going on in the background at the moment.
So what's that, new builds?
It's looking at stuff like flipping properties, also looking at rent-to-rent type projects as well. So there's all sorts of things going on in the background at the moment, where there's lots of opportunities out there.
So you don't want to delve yourself into the commercial world. Is it more residential that you're kind of staying in?
Residential is where I specialise. However, I've done some commercial projects. So, again, going back to the whole thing of, you know, I find it hard to say no. I think if an opportunity did come my way and it was the right one, commercially, then I'd probably say, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Yes, let's go ahead.
Because I suppose it is a translatable skill set from residential to commercial. Not being in the industry, you'd think, well, it's the same. But obviously it's not the same, it's two different models. But it's a translatable skill set that you can use flicking between commercial and residential. There's there's intricacies and niches that change and differ on each side of the fence, I suppose. But it is, because again, like I said, we don't do a lot of residential, but when we do, you can kind of adapt to doing it because it's similar-ish type thing. Yeah. So, like going forward as well, you've got a couple of clients that you work with at the moment, and you want to push for some more clients. But when you say take a step back, is that because you want to do other things like the property development and projects yourself, or is that because you see your skill set in an individual area within the business and other people can take forward other areas?
I think my main skill set is really, it's the client-facing side of things, it's the problem-solving. I do delve into a lot of the details at the moment in terms of, pricing things, variations, etc. And, the day-to-day management. And I think there's benefit in me taking a little bit more of a step back and letting other people do those things. And I do have people to fill those gaps. So
when you're question on that actually, when you're pricing projects that are, because by the sounds of it, you work on schemes that go over a long period of time, maybe over up to a year, maybe over a year, with the multi-millions of pounds that you've been talking about.
Sometimes 2-3 years.
So like when you're costing it, how do you, because prices fluctuate, material prices tend to go up every single year, labour prices fluctuate up and down depending on demand. How do you how do you secure the costs, and also how do you allow, or how do you get subcontractors to kind of like secure their costs? Because there's loads of situations and I can only speak from the commercial side of things, where I've heard companies who have taken on projects that have been over a year, well over a year, 2-3 year projects, and they've secured costs at a certain rate, but with the fluctuation of materials and labour, that ultimately has meant that they've ended up losing money on the project because they've secured cost at the rate 3 years ago. So like, how do you have the foresight and sort of understanding to try and mitigate risk in that sense?
Very, very, very good question. And it's something that is very current on a project of mine. So I think firstly, I mean, we all know with COVID what happened with the price of materials, and
that was the stem of a lot of the companies I'm talking about. Well, one of the larger ones, which was the ISG, obviously, that happened, and that was an element of it. I'm sure there was loads of different elements to it, but quite a few companies that I know of that have gone bust or gone under is because of COVID and what happened during the COVID period.
I think it all comes off the back of COVID, which I learnt a lot.
We all did.
I think it is very much about what you're signing up to contractually. So there are various different things that I have done within the contracts that I'm involved in. So fluctuation clauses. So if the price of a material, say for instance, goes above 5% above what you've priced, you might have built some contingency into your original prices, but there should be a clause within the contract where if it goes above 5%, you need to have a discussion. I think those types of clauses, it's making sure you have those early conversations. The other big element is procurement of materials well in advance of when you need them. So, for instance, on a project of mine, having an advance payment schedule in place for procurement of stuff like even finishes, so timber floor, tiles, might even be plant room equipment. And it's making sure that everyone is on board with that, such that the design is confirmed as early as possible, such that you can procure those materials and hold them. I've done exactly that, on a couple of projects, and it pays dividends because you're not having to, a year down the line, think, oh no, that price has gone up by 40%.
And that's what it did in COVID, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Especially still, we do a lot of mezzanine floors. And the prices still went up. I can't remember what it was now, but drastically went up, and it was difficult for us to even hold prices for clients for 7 days, let alone...
It was madness, wasn't it? I mean, I remember the price of, I think it was cedar and Siberian larch.
Yeah.
I may well be quoting the wrong figures, but I think in some instances it went up by 70%.
It's like, how do you even account for that?
How do you absorb that?
You can't. Well, a lot of people can't.
Particularly when you've got no a lot of companies I knew at the time didn't have any fluctuation clauses.
And then when you look at products like that, you know better than anybody, but can you procure them projects early and store? Because those are the types of products and materials that warp, and I suppose like storing methods might be an issue as well. So people might look at buying natural woods and thinking, I don't want to buy it too early on the project because, I'm then accountable for storing them, and then, what natural wood does, it bends, bows and warps over time. Yeah. So that's why it's just interesting to hear your response to that, just to how they've mitigated those risks in terms of like the costs.
I think it stems back to the conversation earlier about relationships. Yeah. Relationships with suppliers, subcontractors. I think it's about having those open conversations, early doors. What if prices do go up? What are we going to do? Are you all of a sudden going to put your prices up? Or is there a certain level that you've built into your price? Or can we, procure materials early and you hold them, maybe in their raw form, like, unfinished timber. You finish it later. But you've got the raw material there. I mean, obviously there are, issues, as you quite rightly said earlier, with doing that. But there are a number of ways of, reducing that cost risk, which I think is becoming more and more important and paramount on, certainly on the high-end side of things.
I imagine because those finishes are probably, expensive finishes, and you're not just nipping down to or ordering off old Victoria Plumbing something. You're going exactly. To overseas and ordering some real fine products. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today on SQFT-Stories. It's been interesting because usually I record from a commercial perspective in terms of like the project. So it's been interesting to hear your side of things from the residential. And it sounds like you're doing great things as well with your business and offering like a turnkey solution, because there's not usually people specialise in an individual area along the process. Either it's the early cost consultancy or it's the project management. So it sounds like you're doing some great things. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us today, and look forward to the release.
Thank you, Callum, for having me.
No worries. Thanks, Ben.